Hello everyone, this is Rick and welcome to Astral Club. Title of this video is Why Can't I Astral Project Yet? Before we get started, just want to talk about Patreon real quickly. We have a new Patreon member, Daniel Goodpasture, has joined as an Astral Master, and he is now supporting the channel as an Astral Club member on Patreon. So thank you very much, Daniel. If you'd like to join him and help create more of this content, all you have to do is go to the description and click on the link, which will take you to the Astral Club Patreon site. And I thank everyone who has taken part in that in the past and the future as well. Okay, thanks a lot. Let's get started. Okay, astral projection. Now, we all know what it is. You're leaving your body consciously and going whatever place or time or dimension you desire, and then returning with full knowledge of that information. There are many people who have listened to my videos and other videos, and they still haven't been able to do it yet. What I'd like to do, now I've offered other videos that do talk about different methods, as well as all these videos of my experiences, and I'll certainly explain why I do what I do. There's three different minds, if I can use that term, that need to be addressed before one can astral project. First is the conscious mind, the next is the subconscious mind, and then there's something I call the emotional mind, where fear plays a big part. Now we're going to get into some techniques that will help to address a particular part or one of the parts of these three minds that I think is usually responsible for the inability to astral project. And these three things are self-hypnosis, visualization, and tapes as you sleep. First, let's talk about the conscious mind. Now, that's the one we're all the most familiar with. This is the mind that listens to these videos and is instructed by reading books and listening to recordings, what have you, about astral projection. Now, this is important because there are people out there who spontaneously astral project, and I know that gets probably frustrating for some people, but they do, but they don't understand what's happening. And as a result, they're confused, usually fearful as well, and then they waste that opportunity. Now, if you're listening to Astral Club, if you're a member of Astral Club, chances are your conscious mind is probably not the trouble here. I have over 100 videos now on Astral Club. If you listen to them all, you know what you need to know from a conscious mind standpoint. So that's not the major problem. Now, if you still need more information, then in the past I've recommended a series of 3 books, and I'll mention them again now. There's Journeys Out of the Body by Robert Monroe. That is the seminal work that introduced modern astral projection to the people of the world. And he talks about his astral projections. Leaving the Body by D. Scott Rogo. This is more of a how-to book than the other two that I'm mentioning. He gets into the nitty-gritty of how to do it. And then the last one of my favorite trilogy is The Projection of the Astral Body by Sylvan Muldoon. This is over a 100-year-old book at this stage of the game, but he's got some solid astral projections in there. For the most part, they're not fancy, but for the most part, they tell you what to expect in your typical boring astral projections, which constitute to this day probably about 90% of my astral projections. You guys only get the ones that turn out to be interesting and cool. You don't hear about the other 90% that are just not that interesting. Okay, so assuming you've listened to my videos at least, if not other people's videos, and you've read these 3 books, or you're going to read these 3 books, your conscious mind has all the information that it needs at this point. It knows what astral projection is. It will be able to recognize if it's happening, and you'll know what to do. For instance, what I've always said is once you get out of your body, get the hell out. Get as far away as possible so you don't get pulled back in again. You'll be aware of that. Now, that sounds simple to you and I, but you'd be surprised how many projections end prematurely because folks just sit there or stand there and stare at their physical body until they get pulled back in again. So that part of it you're probably okay with, or you will be okay with if you listen to more videos and let's say you're a newer person. Now, I'm going to skip to the emotional mind and skip over the subconscious for right now. The emotional mind, and the biggest emotion here is fear, because fear plays a big part in our inability to astral project. If you don't know what to expect, if you're ignorant of what happens during astral projection, when you're confronted with the vibrational phase, or you find yourself standing outside your body, if fear kicks in, you're going to get pulled back in again. Or if fear kicks in when you're about to astral project, that will ruin the astral projection. And the worst part is many people think, well, I'm not going to be afraid. I'm going to be happy when this happens. But then when it actually happens, they exhibit fear and then they ruin it. Just try to understand that fear, it's an animal fear, and it's a fear of the unknown. Rely upon what you've learned in these videos. Rely upon what you've read in the books that I mentioned and other positive astral projection books, and know that you're completely safe. Now, let's get to the real bear here. Let's get to the real roadblock, the one that really causes the most trouble when it comes to astral projection. Okay, let's say your conscious mind knows what you have to do. You've gotten your fear under control. At least you think you have. But now the subconscious mind. You need to get your subconscious mind on board in order to initiate the projection. Essentially, what happens is your conscious mind, typically when I astral project, I'm lying in bed, or I'm sitting up in a car falling asleep, or I'm on a jet plane, which I've done a couple different times, and I'm falling asleep. My conscious mind ends up meeting my subconscious mind. Conscious mind falls, subconscious mind rises, and they meet at that place. Now, if you can control that point, that's one of the ways you can astral project. For instance, if you've ever just been in a situation where you were very tired, but you couldn't fall asleep for whatever reason, maybe you're working or you're driving, and you're thinking conscious thoughts, but then all of a sudden, weird thoughts creep into your mind. You start thinking about peppermint elephants or giraffes that are running, the Indy 500 race. That's your subconscious mind. Now, your subconscious mind is hard to reach. Why? Because it can't be reached the same way your conscious mind is reached. Your conscious mind responds to logic. It responds to my words. The subconscious mind, though, it works through emotion, and it is very symbolic. It takes, for instance, your dreams. They don't make a lot of sense sometimes. It's because your subconscious mind feels trauma. It feels the emotion of joy and trauma and what have you that you experience during your days or weeks. And then it tries to take figures from your consciousness and personify them and put them and set them up in a little play we call dreams that hopefully will help you to work through this these experiences, this trauma, in such a way that when you awake, you'll feel better that you have somehow dealt with these issues. But the subconscious mind, as I said, is harder to reach because it doesn't respond to words. It responds more to feelings and to visualization. So that's how we have to try to reach it. Now, let me give you an example of something that happens to me and happened to me just in the last few weeks. And this involves tapes as you sleep, which can be very valuable. And I'm going to talk about it first because, like I said, it's still fresh in my mind. I often have trouble sleeping. I think I've mentioned before that I suffer from insomnia. And so I'll play various things. And lately I've been playing these long history specials, 2.5, 3 hours, of the history of the Assyrian Empire or the Byzantine Empire or the Incan Empire. It's like the rise and fall of various empires. And the guy's voice is very melodic. It's very stable, and there's no commercials. So, there's no falling asleep and then all of a sudden there's a loud commercial for feminine hygiene products or something. So it works out very well for me. However, there's some weird side effects, which helps me to figure out that this information is also seeping into my subconscious. For instance, and this is my own particular sick brain, I was having a dream when and I was listening to the Byzantine Empire, fall of that empire tape, when the Black Plague broke out in my dream. And I saw these people with these boils on themselves and what have you. And then I woke up and thought, well, that was fun. Recently, I was listening to the Incan Empire video. And one of the problems probably is I don't listen to these things when I'm conscious, when I'm awake. But as I fell asleep, I had a dream, and in that dream, I got lost in Mexico, and my wallet was lost or stolen, and I was helped by this little leper colony, and I saw these people that were afflicted with this awful leprosy, and when I woke up, I checked it, and yeah, sure enough, that was leprosy. And as I scanned through the video, trying to find out, somewhere in the middle of it, they talked about a leprosy outbreak. So this information is seeping into my subconscious such that my subconscious mind is actually putting this into my dreams now. And there's been other instances too that are less dramatic and less weird. So this is possible. Now, do I recommend this to study for your final exam? No, I don't. And in the past, I remember in college, that was back in the ancient days, that was one of the things kids would experiment with. It doesn't work. Why doesn't it work? Because the information sinks more into your subconscious, and when you're taking an exam, you need your conscious mind. But we're trying to reach the subconscious mind here. That's the main problem. So, what do you do? How do you take advantage of this? I suggest either you use a commercial product, and there's plenty of commercial products out there. You can experiment yourself. I don't have any particular ones. The last time I used something like this was probably 30 or 40 years ago. I doubt they're being used any longer. But I also, when I was in my teens, I'd make my own. Of course, back then it was cassette tapes. I had a little recorder. We're certainly a little bit more advanced nowadays. Chances are you've got some equipment that you can use, even if it's just your phone, to make yourself a tape. Commercial products can be valuable, but sometimes your own voice can also be very persuasive because your subconscious mind is probably most comfortable and most used to listening to your own voice. So, what do you do? Well, what I would do, and what I did back then, is I would read passages from Robert Monroe's Journeys Out of the Body, or I would read from my own journal about my own astral projection experiences. I was trying to get more experiences than I was currently experiencing back then. And in between the various paragraphs where I was reading, Robert Monroe, I was reading my own journal, I would say, tonight, as I fall asleep, my mind will come awake. I will leave my physical body, go where I wish to go, do whatever I wish to do. And when I return, I will awake and have full memory of everything that occurred. Astral projection is perfectly safe and is a very positive and enjoyable experience. Astral projection is safe. And then I'd read another story, read another whatever, and then I'd say that same thing over and over again in between those paragraphs. And after a while, it sunk in. And I'd be in the middle of a dream, and I'd start thinking about astral projection is safe. I want to astral project. And then I would do it. Or I would find myself spontaneously astral projecting more often when I listened to those particular tapes. And that worked for quite a while until my cassette recorder broke, and that was a whole other thing. But, that is, I think, a very interesting way for you to experiment with some sleep induction that will help you to induce astral projection if everything else has failed. Another thing that you can try is visualization. And we've talked about this a little bit before. I experimented with myself again recently, and it worked that very night for me. I stood in my kitchen, and I put my hand on the cold marble countertop and the other hand on this wood post, and stood there for 5 minutes, just soaking in what it felt like to be there, the texture of the wood, the temperature of the marble, and just really pictured what it was for me to be in that space. And then when I fell asleep that night, I pictured again what it felt like to be there and how I wanted to be there. And that very night, probably about 20 minutes later, I astral projected, and usually I'm somewhere else, but I started from there and then I went forward. So there was another idea for you to try. Lastly, there's self-hypnosis. I tried this when I was a teenager as well. It did have some positive effects. It was hard to quantify because I was already astral projecting, but there is innumerable videos and on YouTube about self-hypnosis. There's myriad of books on Amazon and elsewhere about self-hypnosis. There's a lot of myths about hypnosis. All self-hypnosis really is it allows you to put yourself into an extremely relaxed state, allowing your conscious mind to fall to a certain degree while your subconscious mind rises. Now, they don't always meet like you do as you're falling asleep. However, it does allow, if you do it right, a certain amount of information to seep into that subconscious mind. And if you've had some trouble with that reaching the subconscious mind, let it know what you want to do, that can help as well. And it's all a matter of if it's something that appeals to you. If it's not something that appeals to you, don't force yourself to do it. Try the other methods I've discussed. But all it really is it's just another way to try to reach your subconscious mind. Okay, please experiment with those and let me know how it works out for you. I just want to stress that never astral project or attempt to astral project unless you are in a good place physically and mentally. Because the astral plane, much like the physical plane, attracts like. Like attracts like. If you're in a good mood physically and in a good place mentally, psychologically, you will attract similar forces. If you're in a bad place physically, mentally, psychologically, you can attract the reverse, and you don't want to do that. So only try to astral project when you are in a positive, healthy frame of mind. Okay, that's all for this week. If you like this video, please hit the like button, share it with those of like minds. Subscribe if you haven't already. Leave your questions and comments. Always love that stuff. And if you're interested in supporting the channel, there'll be a link in the description that will take you to Patreon and become a supporter of Astral Club. And as always, I'm Rick, and I will see you on the astral plane.